Well, of all of the statements that were uttered this past weekend, primarily from the broadcasting booth, the words from Jim Nance, "wide right," the two most dreaded words in Buffalo have surfaced
Oh,
surfaced
God.
again, was
Yeah.
the punchiest and most encapsulating statement that I had heard all weekend. Just a brutal ending for the Buffalo Bills in what was a phenomenal weekend of divisional round games. And that game alone as well, Chiefs Bills, certainly lived up to the hype. But yeah, those words by Jim Nance couldn't have been more fitting for that moment. Just Buffalo once again unable to get out of its way and seemingly cursed in some aspect of the game, but incredible stuff.
Jim Nance has one of just the greatest voices, presences, deliveries across all of sports. I mean, what he does on golf, what he did during his years with the Final Four and March Madness, and how he is in moments like that. He's one of the all-time greats. And it is
No doubt.
so hilarious that on the other end, you hear Jim Nance in his poignancy say things like that. And the next thing you hear is, I don't know, Jim. Well, he's gonna do it. Mahomes is gonna Mahomes. It's like I will say one of the things that kills me with Tony Romo is he has the great insight of someone who I really like listening to, like a Troy Aikman. Like he sees the game so well, but his delivery is like a guy who's like had 4 or 5 beers
I know
on an empty stomach and is like goofing around by himself, like at the bar, like he's all alone, like he's like trying to entertain himself. It is
a
such
lot of people have thrown that out there. They're like, he seems almost drunk in the booth, and obviously that's like an accusation. Certainly that doesn't really have anything to back it, but he does sound that way. And there have been reports of like not being necessarily prepared, because I will say I've paid a little bit more attention the last like 3 or 4 games I've listened to him since I kind of heard these rumblings over the last year in articles, and he does get like a lot of like facts wrong that maybe you could say like they're not a big deal, but the fact that it's consistently, like, even he called Jason Kelsey, Travis Kelsey's or Taylor Swift's brother-in-law. I'm like, they're not married, like, and he'll say stuff like, oh, I didn't know Jalen Warren and Najee Harris were used as a 1-2 punch this year. It's like, what are you talking about? They've been 1-2 all year long.
So
it's stuff like that. That's
the week 18 Bears Packers. He was calling Luke Getsky, and he was saying how great of a job he had done all year long and how he has really like fixed the offense. And Bears Twitter was just going berserk, especially considering the fact that Getsy is the only one who got fired from the Bears staff at the end of the year, and how bad the offense ended up being. Like, I'm with you. Romo, when he's not talking about just like what he's seeing and what his like what he's diagnosing and the quarterback position, can be a little like, I don't think this guy really is 100% dialed in to what the local fan bases are more dialed into with their own team. But when you listen to him talk about quarterbacks and what he's seeing,
he's as entertaining as they come,
and he's right. I mean, he's right on the money with so much of it. But yeah, you're right. The call of the weekend. We'll get into it here. Bills Chiefs absolutely lived up to the hype. I had said, what did I say on our Friday show? Can the Chiefs score 27? I said I didn't think they could. And they did. They scored 27. I literally said, I knew the number. Can they find a way to score 27? I didn't think they could, but they did. And it was such a beautiful way to end 2 days of great football.
The table is set for NFC AFC Championship weekend, as 4 teams now competing for a spot in Super Bowl 58. Let's get into it. Our divisional round recap. All right, so as we saw there, the Final Four is intact. We've got our NFC Championship game, Lions, 49ers, AFC Championship game, Baltimore Ravens, Kansas City Chiefs going to be two really exciting games, and it was it'll be followed by or preceded, I should say, by four really exciting games in the divisional round that we were treated to this past weekend. So we'll start with the Saturday games, beginning with Texans at the Baltimore Ravens. Mark, this game obviously got started off really tight, really close. Looked like the Texans might, just have a fighting chance here. It was 10-10 well into the second quarter of this game. And you're thinking, oh man, is this going to be a situation where the Texans kind of have Baltimore right where they want them, not letting up too many points, keeping it close, and one play will kind of dictate. But the second half was all Baltimore in this game, and you just saw that defense was tenacious, and then obviously Lamar Jackson making great plays that just kind of sealed the fate there for the Houston Texans. And we talked about it beforehand. Not going to take shots at Houston after what they accomplished this season. So it really was one of those situations where they're playing with house money, and it was a successful season by all accounts. Baltimore had the pressure, and they delivered in the biggest blowout of the weekend, 34-10. So that's exactly what Lamar Jackson, John Harbaugh needed to put out there, get that confidence set once again after a 3-week hiatus for a lot of these starters. To be able to put out a performance like that, I think was needed. If they win this game 17-14, you're maybe feeling a little bit more anxious going into championship weekend. But I'll throw it to you kind of what your takeaway was and how you're feeling about Baltimore ahead of this big weekend coming up.
Yeah, the first half of the game went kind of exactly how you and I both said it would on the show on Friday, where we've had this feeling that Baltimore come out a little tight and that Houston, like they've done the last 2 weeks, is going to come out aggressive. The problem then really hit Houston was that Baltimore, by the time they kind of figured out the game in the second half, that's when it's just like, oh, okay, one of these teams is loaded with talent in their prime versus a team that is really trying to figure it all out on the fly still, a young team. And it just completely, they were overwhelmed by that Baltimore defense. Baltimore is the best defense left in the playoffs, and Baltimore was without Marlon Humphrey. I mean, that just goes to show you what an incredible effort it was for Baltimore. The Texans started their season with a loss against the Ravens. They're ending their season with a loss against the Ravens. Magical season for the Texans. We're going to talk a ton about them this offseason because they're definitely going to be the favorites going into the AFC South next year, and they're going to be a team I feel like will quickly become a free agent kind of destination. Houston, no state tax. CJ Stroud is definitely a player you want to play for. DeMeco Ryans is a coach you want to play for. And so I think the future is extremely bright in Houston. Focusing back on Baltimore, I was really impressed with Lamar and the fact that he was able to completely go Superman the way he did. Over 100 yards rushing, the 4 combined touchdowns. That was the type of performance, you said it best. They needed it. Like Baltimore needed this type of performance just to kind of steady the waters for them and their fan base. And now they're going into this AFC Championship game. You have to be feeling extremely confident riding high. I will say overall, offensively, there were times that Baltimore still feels like it can hit another gear, which is kind of scary. You know what I mean? Like, still felt like there were times when they're not working all cylinders. And who knows, they might be able to get that back, once they add in the tight end, Mark Andrews. Looks like he'll be maybe a good to go for the AFC Championship game. Concerning Gus Edwards going down, Dalvin Cook, the running back position, it feels like it might be failing Baltimore once again. They've just been decimated. Dobbs, they had the rookie who is who then went out as well. Gus Edwards, I don't know the severity of that injury, but he's a piece they need to get back and be healthy if they want to really put pressure on Kansas City next week. So that's going to be one of the storylines to watch coming out of this game. Overall, it was a crown moment for Lamar, and it feels like no matter what, when he wins his MVP award, even if they lose to Kansas City, it won't feel like that time Dirk won it. You know what I mean? Back when Dirk won his only MVP, but then they were out, they got swept in like the first round, or when Lamar won it back in 2019 and losing again the divisional round. Even if they lose to Kansas City, it will feel still like this was the right choice. Lamar put on a heck of a performance in the playoffs. He got a little bit of that monkey off his back with being the favorites as the 1 seed, winning a game. The job's not done yet, obviously, and I still think they should be the favorites going into next week at home. You said it best. I mean, it was a needed victory and a needed performance by him. They got it all, and it was great to see them adjust after halftime, come out a little sluggish, a little slow after all that time off, and they should be firing on all cylinders now as they host the defending Super Bowl champs in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, I think the extra gear, I mean, Mark Andrews certainly will tap into that. I think you hit that on the head there, but also I think, they're just not getting it out of the run game necessarily outside of Lamar Jackson. Keaton Mitchell, that's what made that injury hurt so much, is that he was a guy that at any point could rip off a 35, 40-yard run and really kind of, keep the defense as honest as possible in that regard. So I'm not sure they'll be able to tap into that because they really just don't have the guys anymore. If it is just Justice Hill and Dalvin Cook moving forward, then it's going to have to be even more about Lamar Jackson taking, a hold of the reins there. But, to his credit and to Baltimore's credit, they really haven't needed it as much. They've been fairly balanced throughout the season, but as these injuries have piled up, they've had to lean a little bit more into that pass game, into what Lamar Jackson does. And yeah, I mean, he's able to find a way to, get some of those lanes open, and it's off to the races, and he's as best as anybody when it's out in the open field. So they showed a lot this week that, that it was a fluke with this offense, and that they can roll with the punches moving forward. And so just an overall impressive outing nonetheless. And for Houston, I said it at the beginning, I don't think you can really take anything away from this. No. I know that every team's going to say that they want to go to the Super Bowl and that's what, a victory is for the season. But if there's any such thing as moral victories, the Houston Texans have gotten that in spades this year. And I think they do, hold their heads high. And I think that's probably the message that DeMeco Ryans and even CJ Stroud, I kind of got the sense of that from their press conferences, that, it's upsetting to them. They're winners. They're passionate about, playing a game and getting victories. But man, they have set a foundation that's going to be, a lot to contend with for years to come. And we mentioned it before the season. I don't want to get too much into the general talk of the NFL. We'll have plenty of time in the offseason to do it, but this AFC South is going to be wild to, watch years moving forward, because we talked about how there were 4 young quarterbacks in that division. And if, any number of them hit, it was going to be wild. Well, it looks like, Will Levis has shown flashes. Anthony Richardson was looking good early on. CJ Stroud certainly already becoming a star, and then Trevor Lawrence. This is going to be an awesome division to watch for years to come. So that much I am excited about.
I will add, I saw something interesting. Houston is now the only team in the NFL that hasn't made it to a conference championship game. Now, again, they are still the newest team in the NFL, but even when you think of it that way, they've had some runs at it, and I think CJ Stroud is going to be able to change that eventually for them as making it to a conference championship game. Also, I am in my life, I have a person who is a diehard Ravens fan, is a friend, a buddy. And, he's one of those who's loyal to his team. Like anyone who's loyal to the team, they always find the interesting, odd articles and little nuggets that, we kind of miss when we're not, when you're only listening to Schefter or the big reporters on anything that's not your team, right? You know what I mean? When you're doing any research. Apparently, and I looked this up because I was like, do I believe him? I mean, I trust him. He follows his team like I follow my team. But it's true. Lamar Jackson, and over the course of the time off, he went and he actually lost about 10 pounds in the last 3 weeks.
Jeez.
And one of the reasons why he did that was and we mentioned this, remember Lamar when he won his MVP that 2019 season, the jump from rookie that second year, the big story was, he gained 15 pounds of muscle. He's bulking up to try to, to withstand the season. Well, apparently Lamar, and working with his agents, his nutritionist, and the staff, was like, he would rather play at this lighter weight. It makes him faster, a little shiftier. He feels better at it, but he bulks up for the slog of the season, trying to add that
along the way.
And now he's saying, okay, it's go time. Who cares about injuries? Like, it's all in. So let's get to my playing weight. And he looked fast. I mean, he looked shifty. Now he looked great all year. He's going to win the MVP. But if Lamar has got this strategic, like, oh, now I'm playing at 15 pounds, 10, 15 pounds lighter, and I get that extra burst of speed, and I'm going to try to have to protect myself a little bit more, but I'm going to go all out speed and running.
Look out.
That's a dangerous thing, and we saw it. It was Houston had no answers. I mean, no answers, and they have DeMeco Ryans as the coach, a good young linebacking core. It's like they had no answers for him and his speed and his shiftiness, and that is going to be the matchup, I think, to watch already as you're previewing the AFC Championship game. We'll talk about on Friday. Lamar and the weight loss and the speed, you certainly saw it. If it's true, they're never going to say it's true because they're not going to change his weight listed, you know what I mean? Or it's these reports are coming out, it's all Ravens insiders and stuff. So if it is true, that's awesome. I just think that's what a secret weapon like that. Talk about, flipping the switch in the playoffs. That's flipping a switch.
That is. I mean, a lot of times it is amazing how much weight can make a difference, even if it's just like 10, 15 pounds, like you said. It feels like, to the larger you are, the less, significant that number feels. But for these pro athletes, that makes one hell of a difference. I mean, Le'Veon Bell was massive coming out of Michigan State, and they made him cut like 20 pounds. And that's what turned him into a really able to have that burst at the line of scrimmage.
Totally.
So, I mean, they got the best in the business to help get them there. And 10 pounds in 2 weeks, that's a quick turnaround. But, if anyone can do it, it's a pro athlete.
In your own life, if you lost 10 pounds over the course of like a month and a half, you'd feel a little pep in your step, and you're not a pro athlete. So those guys, they know what they're doing with their bodies. If that is 100% true, which again, I listened to my buddy, and then I looked it up a little bit. Yeah. It's a lot of those, Ravens insider type people who are talking about it. But if it is true, I mean, it could be what, maybe is the secret sauce to Lamar and now his new playoff success.
Wild stuff. And, to piggyback off of the defensive discussion, Houston had 10 points, but 7 of those came from, the special teams touchdown. Yeah. So it wasn't, I mean, the offense literally did almost nothing the entire game, except for, maybe in between the 30s, maybe. But I mean, they just couldn't convert anything.
The only team that held Houston scoreless this year, touchdown wise, was Baltimore in the week 1 and then their final week. Now, again, that was rookie.
I didn't realize that.
That was first game starter, CJ Stroud. But still, Baltimore's defense is very, very for real. And it's funny because they don't necessarily have the names as a San Francisco defense, right? Or a Philly defense,
or the Cowboys even
the Tampa defense. You're watching that game, and we'll talk about it coming up. But you just remind about all these names because you're like, shit, we've seen them in the playoffs the last 3 years and win a Super Bowl. They're all still there for the most part. They don't have necessarily the names that you completely totally recognize, but they're the best defense left in football right now.
They absolutely are. Yeah, there's no question about that. And the team we thought would rival that, and probably still does to some extent since there's only 4 teams left, is the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah.
But their defense maybe didn't look as dominant, certainly this past weekend, as they had been all season long. They edge out the Green Bay Packers 24-21 for the final game on Saturday. And this game obviously looked like it could go either way for the vast majority of it. Deebo Samuel goes down with a shoulder injury. I don't believe we know the extent of it at this point, but it looks like he probably might be out for this championship game, which is a big loss for the 49ers. But Christian McCaffrey, again, was a big part of this game. And then it really came down to the end where Brock Purdy, leads them down the field, I believe 60-plus yards to get the game winner and kind of seal this thing. 24-21, the final. Jordan Love in Green Bay. We already talked about it similar with Houston, where they already proved all the doubters wrong. They had already won in the eyes of so many of us fans and even those who analyzed the game on a deeper level. And so really the Packers were, again, playing with house money in many respects. But they were that close, and that's obviously got to sting. But Matt LaFleur just, I said it last week with the win over Dallas, it's just extremely impressive what he's been able to do. And then, it's really a 50-50 credit in my eyes to Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love for what they've been able to do to, dispel any of the, not just rumors, but just doubters about what he could do as a quarterback in this scheme, in this offense. And that was super impressive. But again, the 49ers, despite this being a close slugfest, they still get the win. And I still feel that they are, a super impressive team, a team that can beat you in a lot of different ways. They had to lean a little bit more on Christian McCaffrey at times in this one, but they've just got dudes, they've got playmakers. And I do think that is ultimately what was the difference maker here, is they just had guys. They had George Kittle. There was too much to contend with, even after Deebo Samuel went down, and that ended up being the difference maker. But what was the standout in this game in your mind?
Well, yeah, they had dudes, and one of them wasn't Brock Purdy. I mean, Brock Purdy to me was the standout in a negative way. I mean, again,
the bizarre thing is, I feel like a lot of there was 50-50, right? There was 50% of the Twitterverse and analysts and media people who were talking about how anyone who doubted Brock Purdy, look at this game, which is a bizarre thing. And then there were the others. I saw Louis Riddick, who I love a lot,
and Nick Wright was a big. It was a big, like,
yeah. They're just like, were you watching the game? This was not a Brock Purdy game, despite him, leading the team down. Obviously get him credit, but he struggled for a good portion of this game.
He really did. And there was, even on the game-winning drive, it was a lot of, again, get the hands into the playmakers, right? And let the playmakers do the work, which I blame Brock Purdy 100% for. I thought the game plan from the Niners was very weird. I didn't think they committed to the run enough. I think they were playing a little bit too nervous. It just felt like they were looking for big plays. And then Deebo went down so early, I felt like they just didn't recover from that well. And we saw it in the 3-game losing streak for the Niners this year. What happened? Brock Purdy played in those 3 games. What happened? There was no Trent Williams, no Deebo Samuel. Those were the 2 missing pieces. Deebo went down. Now Trent was still playing. And it felt like Purdy went back into that mode of like, where do I go? Inaccurate. You doesn't have the arm strength. Like, there's no point in time do I worry that all of a sudden it's just going to be like, oh, Ayuk burned the corner and now he just hit him for a 60-yard bomb. Like, that doesn't exist in that Niners offense from what we've seen. And so for me, that was the biggest takeaway, was at the end, the dudes, you're right, Dan, they bailed out the Niners in the end. And sometimes, listen, when you win a Super Bowl, every single Super Bowl team, we could spend a whole show this offseason picking a different Super Bowl team and finding you the moments where they got lucky, the refs helped them out, health helped them out, an injury made them lose a game here or there, and then 1 or 2 of their best players like saved the day, right? Like, that is the journey of a Super Bowl team. So you don't want to be too overly critical, right? But this game did feel like it came down to the fact that if Jordan Love doesn't make a bad interception late and checks it down and keeps his team moving, and they go on to kick a field goal or to tie the game or throw a touchdown to win the game, like, what are we talking about today? We're talking about not necessarily that the Packers are that good and that the Packers stole the game. We're talking about Brock Purdy kind of shit the bed. Like, that's what we're talking about. The lights were bright again, like they were against the Ravens on Christmas Day, and he shit the bed. Or was it Christmas Day or New Year's? Whenever they played. But like, to me, listen, he needed that final drive because now you can go into it with a little more confidence in the championship game. All right, okay. He didn't play his best game. He was a little inaccurate. He was off, but he did the right things down the stretch and to put this team into the right position to win the games. And then they did rely on their defense to make the young quarterback make a mistake. So I will say this about Green Bay. It's a different kind of celebrating the Green Bay lost, right? I obviously was celebrating the Green Bay lost, but
sure.
This doesn't have the feel of the last couple losses for Green Bay. When they had Aaron Rodgers, they felt like they were all in, win now or go home. This was house money Green Bay. This was rebuilding year Green Bay, and they were a bad decision away from their first-year starting quarterback from winning against the number 1 seed on the road after already beating the number 2 seed on the road. This Green Bay team, the sky is the limit. And if this is now, again, what I think we'll look back on this Green Bay team as, and like now what the future holds, is the first year of the real Matt LaFleur Green Bay Packers. Yeah, he's been there for 4 years? But this is or 5 years. This is the first year of the Matt LaFleur Green Bay Packers, where it's like, no. Aaron is gone. They have brought in all of their players. He gets to just run his system. He has groomed these guys, and holy smokes, how do you not like what you see?
And they're not going off script most of the time. They are.
Yeah, I mean, this is
doing what he dials up.
Yeah, and how do you not like what you see? So the future is obviously extremely bright for Green Bay. And for Jordan Love, Green Bay fans can't get angry because they wanted the next Rodgers and they wanted the next Favre. And at times, he looks like the next Rodgers, off platform, flinging it with the wrist at an interesting arm angle. And you're like, shit, those are throws that Aaron Rodgers makes. And then he threw an interception that is the exact same interception you've seen Brett Favre throw a million times. So if you want him to be the next Aaron Rodgers, the next Brett Favre, that's what you're going to get. And it'd be really funny if Jordan Love is 50% Rodgers and 50% Favre, where Rodgers never threw the back-breaking interceptions and Favre always threw the back-breaking interceptions.
Yeah.
And I think he is he's more well-liked. He's more of that fun locker room energy like Favre compared to Rodgers. So maybe he's got a little
more backyard football in him too.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be really interesting if this kid starts developing in that way and Jordan Love maybe wins the Super Bowl, but also maybe throws some back-breaking interceptions like Favre. And it's going to be a wild ride. And I will say this about San Francisco and kind of focusing back on them for winning the game. Debo, from the reports I heard, Shanahan said it was a very similar type of shoulder stinger neck injury that he had missed the 2 games for earlier in the season. So all accounts in my opinion, would be like they're going to shoot him up like they're going to play him. Like even if he used Debo as a decoy, better than not having Debo out there, correct? Sure. You can run him the ball if you feel like he doesn't have the range of motion to catch. And knowing that you'll get the extra week of rest if you win that game before the Super Bowl. The Niners, I don't think, can afford to rest Debo Samuel. You certainly saw it when he went out. Their offense and Purdy is not the same. It is all eyes. The lights were bright on Purdy, and I didn't love what I saw. And Kyle Shanahan also, struggles sometimes with the clock and some when and where to use those timeouts late game. It's just funny to see a guy who's so good at everything else struggle with a quarterback who just might not be good enough and some really piss poor clock management decisions.
Yeah, no kidding. It's the 2 sides of the coin, so it's we'll see what we get moving forward, but excited for this matchup.
Don't you think Green Bay just was the best? I mean, they played the better game. Like I felt like after that
overall,
game, I felt like Green Bay should have won that game. Like if you're just talking about 60 minutes of football, who was consistently better? It felt like Green
they were
Bay.
better. It was just a play or two that obviously
2 bad interceptions,
and
both of Jordan Love's interceptions were bad. Like the last one is the backbreaker, but the first one wasn't a good throw either. And if Jordan Love really needs to improve in one place the offseason, it's like that little bit of touch accuracy on some of those out routes, 20 yards down the field, like just get a little bit more of that CJ Stroud, like dropping the bucket arc to it. He doesn't seem to have that. And it was costly on that first interception.
Yeah, got to be a little bit more rhythmic perhaps from Jordan Love, but those are things that can be improved, much easier than other issues. So I think the future's bright, no question about it. But we will get to the other 2 games, the Sunday slate, coming up right after this.
For frequency's sake, has you covered on all things sports. From the squared circle to the hardwood and the gridiron to the speedway, we've got something for everyone. Walk down the aisle with the boys from Cards Subject to Change every Sunday as they take a deep dive into everything pro wrestling. Need your gambling fix? We've got you there. Enter Pit Row with Rod Villagomez and Fast Money as we win the checkered flag with NASCAR, Xfinity, and truck race winners and props. Football more your style? Explore the waters of NFL DFS with DFS Deep Dive with Brian Craighead and Jordan Kernan each week. More into the science portion of the game? We've got a double dose of action there. The Professor John Bush and Dennis Michelson take you into their science lab and dissect your week in the data lab. Want an analytical take? Nick Gurl and the team at Gridiron AI come to you each week with The Lab. Need to know who to start last minute? The network's flagship show, For Fantasy's Sake, is here in a pinch. The fellows come to you live every football Sunday from 10 to 11:30 Central with the week's best DFS, gambling, and lineup advice. And wrap up your Sundays with Joe Winkle and Nick Brinks as they come to you live with educated ignorance, looking at all the day's action. Can't get enough of Joe? He comes to you 3 times a week. Not enough football on Sunday? Not a problem. Kick your feet up at lunch on Monday and slip on into the football lounge with Mark and Dan while they look at the week that was in news, notes, and more. For frequency's sake, you know what we mean.
All right, welcome back. We've got the 2 Sunday games. The Buccaneers at the Detroit Lions. This game was certainly entertaining as well. Baker Mayfield throwing all over the field, but he threw 2 interceptions in this game that certainly he would want back, especially the one that sealed the game. And, of course, he was chirping a little bit with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and, of course, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson ended up getting an interception in this game to kind of back up the talk, even though we had mentioned in the last episode, probably ill-advised to do that. But nonetheless, the Lions come out with the victory 31-23 in this one. Jared Goff, Dan Campbell, Detroit. The underdogs are headed to the NFC Championship game. They're 1 win away from their first ever Super Bowl. It really does seem like a fate-filled team this year. And, despite not playing the perfect game, there were plenty of moments throughout this game where I imagine you would echo these sentiments that we were just not sure who's going to come out on top. It was, tit for tat the whole way through. It was 10-10 at the break. And then it was 17-17 after 3. And we're like, okay, what's going on here? But the fourth quarter did belong to Detroit. And that ended up being, the way that this one panned out was that the Lions were able to close when it mattered most. And Jared Goff held on to the football. No turnovers from his end, 2 from Baker Mayfield. And that really, to me, spelled the difference in this game. I thought that despite it being an 8-point game at the end, it felt like if you just watched the fourth quarter, that Detroit dominated this game, but really the first 3 quarters was anybody's game.
Yeah, well, and that's what made it such an impressive win, in my opinion. Detroit refused to let the fact that they played a very average game and kind of kept the Lions in it. Detroit came in with one of the best rush defense in the NFL. And the running back White for Tampa was just chewing up yards. Like that kid's an explosive back too, especially catching the ball in the backfield. If you haven't watched him play all year, they got a real weapon in him, White in the backfield. And Baker was accurate. Baker was, dropping a couple of balls in that should have been caught. He had a couple, drops from even guys like Mike Evans. Otten was a real playmaker for Tampa Bay throughout this game. And you're sitting there at the end of the third going, oh my God, the Lions are just finding ways. They're not playing a good game. I just felt like every time they needed something, it kind of stalled. Things just kind of blew up. It was a weird drop. It was, they couldn't establish the run the way you thought they would. Vita Vea was eating them up. They lost one of their starting guards. Their really good offensive line seemed to be kind of just, stalling against that, vicious front 7 of Tampa. And all of a sudden you're like, they're going to blow it. They're going to lose to Tampa because they're just not playing their best game. And then the fourth quarter happens, and it felt like the offense and Ben Johnson were just like, okay, flip the switch. Let's just and you know what they did? They put it in Goff's hands, and Goff was the difference. Like, he was fantastic in the fourth quarter, and the offensive line gave him plenty of time. Ragnow is a freaking monster. Now that Kelsey's probably retired, definitely the best center in the league. We're all up there with Creed Humphrey, and just like absolute monster, just a absolute animal, handling Vita Vea I loved when they handed it off to their third running back on the goal line. You think, okay, they're going to not run it with what's his name because it's not Montgomery or Gibbs. And
Craig Reynolds.
Like easy touchdown there. Like, so they were just really creative. They were in control. And it felt like the fourth quarter came around and then they started playing with their food. They let Tampa score that after being up 2 touchdowns. And you're like, oh shit. Now it's an 8-point. Now they go for 2, which was the smart call by Todd Bowles, even though they didn't get it. Then you're like, oh crap. Now they got to go out there and put a drive and end this game. And they did. So like really, really, really impressed by the Lions. Like at home, that place was rocking once again. They had so much energy after that first win. You could tell it just came out a little wonky, a little flat. The game plan they had just wasn't working. And then they didn't commit to the run because it felt like the run was just, Vita Vea was just crushing it. The linebackers, Levante David and White, they were flying all around. You thought, oh my God, this is not happening right now. And then Mike Evans starts going off in the second half, and you're like, uh-oh. So really impressed by the way that Detroit hung in there. For Tampa, my God, if especially Bill Belichick doesn't end up in Atlanta, there's no reason why Tampa shouldn't just try to bring back a lot of these veterans and kind of do what the Rams did. Like, all right, bring back a couple key veterans, but then just get younger and build around this kind of, veteran core and some really good coaching on defense, because they were 4-7 at one point in this year. And they were a couple plays away there at the end of the game from being in the NFC title game because Baker balled out in their 2 playoff games. Yeah, he threw a bad. One of the picks was not his fault, off the hands, little high, but that it should have been caught. It hit him right in the hands of Godwin. And so you can say, all right, he threw one bad pick, but overall he was let down from his offensive line with some bad blocking schemes, took a couple shots. Baker deserves to be the starting quarterback of the Tampa Bay Bucks in 2024 and beyond.
Oh, yeah, he earned it.
At least 2024. And you'd argue he might be a top 5-6 quarterback in the NFC right now, just how he played this year. And you could tell he humbled himself, the leadership, the moxie, very much in the way of Jared Goff, where it's just like the dude's believing in him. And if you build the right roster around him with the right energy for your head coach, Todd Bowles proved me wrong this year. He had a really great second half of the football season to lead that team to the playoffs, win that division, and go on a little bit of a run here. Talk about a team that really changed the trajectory of their future for the next couple of years with a hell of an end to the second half. For Detroit, what I'd like to see from Detroit is a couple things. I'd like to see them absolutely build off of what they did with Jared Goff in the fourth quarter. Good play action. They found a way to still be effective with the run game, mainly with Gibbs, where it wasn't like we need to pound the rock. It was like selective zone, a little more zone running. They pulled Penei Sewell a couple of times. They got Gibbs on the outside. I think that will be something to focus on as they look towards preparing for San Francisco, attacking Chase Young when he's in the game, running at Chase Young. That's what the Packers did, and they did it really effectively. So I think there's a lot to like if you're a Detroit fan. It's going to be tough for Detroit not playing in that atmosphere because, man, you could tell they gained – it was a true home field advantage. So Detroit having to go on the road, we'll see how that ends up working for them. Weather shouldn't be too much of a factor. Also, they just signed Ertz. That was an underrated move this morning. We didn't start off with any news or notes. They signed Zach Ertz, the tight end. I think Laporta was very much used as a decoy throughout the last 2 weeks. You could tell he's playing, but he doesn't have the same burst. And so if you can get Ertz to come in there and really, provide you some of those quick underneath, routes, or just to have enough of a receiving threat as a backup, just in case Laporta, tweaks it or isn't 100%, or you give him an extra breather or two. I think that's a really smart move. He's a smart veteran player who him and Goff will be able to get on the same page within a week for at least a handful of packages and plays. So I love that move. Also, Ertz played against the Niners a lot the last 2 years being in Arizona. So he'll know exactly how to attack the defense. You even bring him in to pick his brain about what you want to do against that linebacking core. I love that move from the Detroit Lions. And so big win for the Lions. Feels like now it's more than just a flash in the pan. They're really for real, and pumped the way that Detroit responded in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and I think part of the Zach Ertz move too is gives them a solid red zone weapon as well, because a lot of their guys are either, speedster deep threats or, really, tactician route runners, not necessarily the red zone fade guys or just a big target over the middle that Sam Laporta's been, that TJ Hawkinson was. Now you get, Zach Ertz in there, especially if Laporta can't be used the way they want to, but they're certainly getting a little bit bigger too. I think we might be seeing a lot more 12 personnel out of Detroit this upcoming week, given that they're going up against such a stout front in San Francisco. I will say one final thing about the Bucs. That did irk me. It doesn't matter anymore at this point. And then it's not like I'm the only one bringing it up. But at the end of the game, the not taking a timeout, Detroit rushed it. They should have waited, but they rushed it, and they took a knee with 35 seconds to go. And if Tampa takes a timeout there, it's fourth down. Detroit has three options: try and run around and, waste time off the clock, which they wouldn't do with 35 seconds because you're only going to be able to run off maybe 10 at most. So they would either take a shot at a field goal, which would have been, I think, a 48-yarder. You can get a block. They could miss it, and you get the ball right there with 25 seconds left. That's a couple plays. Or they punt it, which is what I would have done if it was Detroit in that situation, make them drive. But if they punt it, it could go out of bounds, and you still have an opportunity with 20 seconds. You got two plays. Like Todd Bowles said, we wouldn't have had any time there. They would have had 20, 25 seconds at worst. And so I just think it's a bizarre thing for me. I don't think they knew how much time was left. I really don't think they knew.
I don't put a lot of blame on the Bucs staff for that. I think people were overreacting to that. I'm glad you brought it up, because I think when you're in that,
you wouldn't take an extra 20, your season.
No, Dan. Let me finish. What I'm saying is, I think everyone in that building, the game was over, right? Like like they're taking headsets off. Like everyone knows it's over. Detroit had a slight mishap. They took it, a couple seconds earlier that could have then, you know what I mean? But I think everyone at that point in time, I don't think there's anyone even thinking through. The refs are already the Gatorade bath started. It's just one of those things where I feel like if they would have done it, I think the refs would have honored it. But I don't blame the Tampa staff for not being on top of that. Oh my God, because the game was over. It was a slight error on Detroit's part to do what they did, but the game was over. So I think it's one of those where you're I
don't know, man. I feel like if you get paid millions of dollars in the
you
biggest
fight
league
for
in the world, you're one of 32 head coaches. And if in my view, your job is to give your team the best chance until the final whistle. It's why I have issues with guys giving up 45 seconds at the end of a first half and just taking knees. You have 45 seconds of football. You get 60 minutes of football to play.
I agree.
So anytime that a team, you have to be on top of that. It was similar with Buffalo. From what maybe they actually went out there with the plan to do that fake field goal, fake punt. But a lot of people were talking about how Kansas City only had 10 players on the field. Well, anyone can take that situation for granted and say, okay, we're punting. Let's go out there. They're going to put their punt return team and we're going to punt. But they had the wherewithal to say, oh, shoot, they only have 10 guys out here. Let's do the fake because, this is an opportunity we're given. I feel like you gotta, I get it. I get what you're saying. And like I said, it doesn't matter now. And it's not the biggest thing in the world, but it's also something where I think,
it's valid.
You got to give your team as much of a chance as possible. And you have to be able to take advantage of when other teams screw up. It's
I will say the one thing that I'm really happy about as I look back on this weekend of football, there is no game that I feel like how I felt after the Lions versus Dallas. Every single game, there was some calls, but I felt like each call had a makeup call in the game. Each team got where, you know what I mean? Think about it.
Yeah, there wasn't anything insane or
it's egregious to where you're oh my God, they got totally screwed. The other team got no calls. I felt like the Detroit-Tampa game was a great example of like every time there was one that was kind of ticky-tacky, like the Baker Mayfield leg down, like there was the what was that later on that happened? It's like, okay, well now that went Detroit's way. Like there always felt like it was like, okay, there should never be a mistake, but the things always trickle down to where each team can look at it and go,
it evens out.
We were overall fairly treated.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And well, it's exciting that Detroit is in the NFC Championship game. We haven't seen that in our lifetime, so it's really cool that they finally get there. The Chiefs go on the road to the Bills for the final game, obviously the one that we were very excited to watch and see along with the rest of America. This game, goes down to the wire as expected. We've had quite a few of these matchups go down to the final moments. And unfortunately, for the third straight year, the Buffalo Bills are ousted by the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs. So Josh Allen is no stranger to these, post-game press conferences. But this is the first one in Buffalo. And obviously a lot's going to be made of it coming down to that final, moment where Josh Allen kind of helps get the team down the field, but then they stall just outside of the red zone. And then Tyler Bass misses I believe, 44-yard field goal, which would have tied the game.
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes would have had over a minute left to do something with it. And you think that he probably would, just because he's Patrick Mahomes, have been able to dial something up. But, you always want to give yourself a chance. And obviously that put the dagger in the Bills for, any hope at turning this one into an overtime game or getting to that AFC Championship. So, it did end in an anticlimactic fashion, and we were all looking for, those sparks to be flying to the final second, the final whistle, but that's just not kind of how it panned out in this one. Overall, Josh Allen, I thought, played hero once again, like we're accustomed to seeing. I thought he did a lot for this team. And, there's just a couple plays that maybe Kansas City made that Buffalo didn't. One thing comes to mind is Valdez-Scantling making a couple huge plays.
Finally, really showed up.
Trent Sherfield missing a diving play that would have been about 45 yards down the field. At one point, Josh missed Stephon Diggs on like a 65-yard bomb late in this game as well. But the one thing that really stood out to me, Mark, that was the biggest difference maker in my mind, no question about it, and this was on Good Morning Football, they pointed this out. Kansas City had 8 plays of 20-plus yards in this game, something that had been missing from the Kansas City playbook all year long.
Felt like old Kansas City.
It really did. And Buffalo had 0 plays of 20-plus yards. The last time Buffalo had been held to 0 plays of 20-plus yards in a game was in Josh Allen's 4th career start.
Wow.
It's been several years since they were held. Got to give kudos to Kansas City's defense. They made Buffalo earn every blade of grass in this game. And they basically said, we're going to make you do, shallow crossers. We're going to make you do drags and have guys try and win with yards after the catch because we're really good at tackling the ball, and we're going to make you run it and try and get stuff done. They obviously gave up some plays to Josh Allen with his legs a couple times there, especially in the red zone. But they were willing to give those up if it meant not giving up the massive deep balls. And, a couple of those plays that I just mentioned were tough plays to make. And so Kansas City forced them into that situation, and they weren't able to make it. So I thought that was the biggest difference in this game. And kudos to the Chiefs. They were able to channel that aspect of the game. And now they're super dangerous now if they're capable of putting up 8 plays of 20-plus yards like the old Chiefs.
So to me, Buffalo is just it's got to be terrible waking up in Buffalo today and trying to figure out, like, what do we do? Because a large part of me feels like Buffalo did everything right in so many ways. And the problem was, I look back in this game, is no Gabe Davis, down to only dressing 3 linebackers for the game. And all of the 3 they dressed, none of them were like day one starters. They also then lost people throughout the game. Like, I mean, Buffalo felt like
a lot of injuries throughout the game.
They were the most injured team. And part of, again, like I said earlier, whatever team wins the Super Bowl, we'll be able to look back at their points of their journey. And a lot of times they end up being one of the 2 or 3 most healthy teams left at the end of the year. That is part of what it is to win a Super Bowl, what it takes. So Buffalo's got to just be like dizzy this morning, trying to figure out like what went wrong. What do we do? What do we fire the coach? Do we move on? I love what they did with Joe Brady in the second half of the season after making the change from Ken Dorsey. I think Cook is really coming on. I think Josh Allen played really great football in a lot of ways down the stretch because he was complementary to his offense at times. I thought he was then Superman when he needed to be. I thought Josh could have been better in that last drive in the late in the fourth quarter. There, as you said, they didn't let them have any big plays, and there was still some under the knee stuff to take on that to make it an easier field goal, or to make it even maybe you go for it on fourth down as opposed to and try to keep milking the clock. Don't even give the ball back to Kansas City. So there was a lot late in that game that you can be uber critical of, but also what it comes down to is Mahomes was freaking phenomenal on the road.
Awesome.
There were so many times that Mahomes should have been sacked, and 9 out of 10 other quarterbacks in the league would have got sacked. Baker would have got sacked in those moments. And what did Mahomes do? Like little hip shift, little side movement with the shoulders, move forward, and on no platform with no planning of the feet, flings it 100% accurately 30 yards downfield. It's just different. It's just different. Now, Josh
it reminds us that he's the clear best quarterback.
And Josh is also just different. You watch him take some of those hits, deliver some of those hits. Yeah. Just the arm. And I mean, the deep balls, you're like, good Christ. I mean, it's just, but what Mahomes is different can do in those moments. And then running the ball and just deciding to tuck it at times. He really is special. And what it came down to is Mahomes found a way to, with his guys, and especially Kelsey in this game, to be like, no, we can score 27. We'll find a way to score 27. And early in the game, those 2 red zone trips to turn into field goals. I'm like, they're falling into it. They're screwed. That Buffalo's got them where they want them. They're holding them to field goals, and that defense is holding on. But it felt like Kansas City's game plan just consistently, like, just give it time. It's going to break. It's going to pop. These are guys, 4th string, 3rd string guys. And even though our weapons aren't 100%, they're not what we want them to be as far as star weapons anymore. They just found ways to take advantage of them. And guys like Valdez-Scantling, they came up and made big plays in big moments. Pacheco, big plays. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, big plays in big moments. Obviously, Kelsey was fantastic. So I really think this was just one of those games where if you're Buffalo, if this was the Super Bowl, if this was the AFC Championship game, if this was the wild card round, if this was the divisional round, whatever, like, you just, again, I don't think it's like blow it up, Buffalo stinks. I think it really, truly reminds me a lot of some of those Phillip Rivers Chargers teams. And you're like, this dude is really good. This dude's really special. This dude could be a Hall of Famer. He's got a lot of talent around him. But for some reason, in these big moments and big times, it's just things don't add up. They didn't go right. I don't know where Buffalo goes from here. I don't know. We're going to talk a lot about Kansas City on Friday's show in the preview. I don't know where Buffalo goes from here. But I know that Josh Allen is one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the NFL. I know that if they were 100% healthy like they wanted to be week 1, like week 1 starters in this game, Milano and some of those guys, I know that would have helped. I know it would have made a difference.
Right.
But I also know that Kansas City at this point in time and the head coach, Andy Reid owns your head coach in these moments. And maybe that's where you have to look. And maybe that's where you just say to yourself, as great as this run has been, if we want to try to get over the hump, like look at the Rams. The Rams went to a Super Bowl, went to multiple playoff wins, but they said to themselves, as good as this is, we want to get over the hump. Let's go mortgage our future for Matt Stafford. And it worked. And maybe the Bills have to look at this and say, as good as this is, and as nice as this has been, we want to get over the hump. So maybe the change is the head coach or, something drastic. Trade Stephon Diggs, go in a different direction. I don't know, but like it feels like maybe they have to do something like that. Yeah. Unlike, like you could argue like your Steelers feel like they need to do something like that, but you could also say, well, yeah, but that head coach has won one. Like, you know what I mean? And so it's a little different. Like if John Harbaugh loses to the Chiefs next week, you could say, man, Andy Reid owns him and blah, blah, blah. But you can also say, yeah, but he has won one. And so with Buffalo,
right.
With Buffalo, the excuse you can stay the same course and you can put yourself back in the wild card round, the divisional round, the AFC Championship round. You're going to play the Chiefs again. And what can you do between now and the next time you play the Chiefs in the postseason, wherever that game is? Because you almost beat them in Kansas City, 13 seconds. You almost did it. You almost beat them at home. So, like, you've got to really, if you're the GM, you're the owner, you've got to spend a ton of time really analyzing, like, what is that 2% that we're missing that's different, that's wrong?
It's a hard thing to do.
And again, if you're a Buffalo fan right now, you're in a tizzy. And I feel my heart breaks for it because it's up. I'm jealous. Like, trust me, I'm jealous. I wish my team had just won my division 4 straight years and had a chance to win the Super Bowl with one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the league. I don't feel too bad for them. But it is sometimes the harder thing to solve is the 2% as opposed to the blow it up. We're terrible. We need to start over.
Yep. There's no question. I think the Chargers comp is a good one. You could, argue they're kind of like the Dallas of the last couple decades where they've had really good teams, good quarterback play. Obviously, Allen's better than Dak and Romo, but it's just, that type of thing. The Green Bay never being able to get over the hump, constantly going back, deep, trying to make deep runs in the playoffs and just getting ousted. So, they got to figure it out because Josh Allen, again, he seems like a guy that can buck the trend of the Cam Newtons and Big Bens where they wear down really early, but you're also rolling the dice. Like the closer he gets to turning into his 30s, how many more prime years are you going to get out of him in terms of his mobility? You really want to capitalize as soon as possible on that talent. So a lot of great games. We've got a great Final Four here with the Niners, Lions, Ravens, Chiefs should be 2 really good matchups this upcoming week. We've got both games on Sunday. The Ravens are early favorites, 3.5 points at home. 3:00 game on CBS, 3:00 Eastern. 6:30 Eastern is Lions 49ers. The Niners are favored by 7 early on. So we'll see how that changes throughout the week. But I'm really excited for our episode on Friday to kind of dive into these matchups.
I will say really quickly, in a just a tease to get people excited for Friday. I've already bet my winners for divisional for the championship conference. I Sunday night I sat there and I said to myself, I was looking back at the results and looking ahead, and I said to myself, I feel really clear and confident about what I feel after this weekend, and I don't want anything throughout the week to jar me away from that. So I've trusted my gut. We'll make our picks on Friday, obviously. One of the things I think is really a fun storyline, and I think Nick Wright mocked it on Twitter, saying like, people want to say Allen Mahomes feels a lot like Brady Manning, where Manning had the MVPs, but Brady had the Super Bowls. I agree with Nick. He's wrong. It's not right. It doesn't right. Allen's been very good, but Allen doesn't have MVPs. If Allen had 2 or 3 MVPs but no Super Bowl wins, you'd be like, yeah, this feels really right. But it does? Yeah. It really could start to feel like Brady Manning this weekend's matchup, Lamar and Mahomes, because Lamar's going to have 2 MVPs and no rings. And Lamar this is now, I know it feels weird because both players play so different from Brady and Manning, but Lamar's going to have 2 MVPs, and he is going to be looking to get by the guy who's owned the league the last 6 years. I mean, Mahomes, 6 straight AFC title games.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Did you see something like if you I didn't see exactly how many and what Mahomes already has more playoff wins than Peyton Manning. He's got more playoff wins than Aaron Rodgers. I mean, it's like he's now in an era where it's like
I say, he literally is. He is getting closer and closer to Tom by the minute.
It's like really Montana and Tom are the only ones above him with any sort of postseason stats. And the dude is not even 30, or he just turned 30. He's not even 30, I don't think.
Yeah. No, it isn't great. It's crazy. We've never seen anything like this
to
start a career.
The hot start. I mean, Tom, the longevity.
Tom won 3 early, but he didn't go to 6 straight AFC championship games to start his career.
And he wasn't the MVP level putting up the stats.
Correct.
I mean, Tom ends up with multiple MVPs and Super Bowl, but like, I mean, it's just wild. It's Lamar, that Ravens defense so good. I can't wait. Friday show's gonna be great. I'm so excited.
It's gonna be great. Really looking forward to it. But yeah, that will come later on this week, so be sure to check that one out and stay tuned for all of that. But yeah, in the meantime, be sure to give us a follow. As always, we're on TikTok now, so go check us out there if you want some nuggets from the shows. And yeah, we will see you back here on Friday.